It's fantastic.
Yeah, I have like a short little excerpt. Hi everybody, I'm David. Hi David. This is Adam. Thank you guys so much for coming, by the way. I have a short little thing to read, so I don't know.
Do you want to start with that?
Yeah. And then, I don't know, I guess we could stand, or we could like, if there are still chairs, maybe we could just squeeze some chairs over there and sit. I don't know.
I'd say
I don't know how these things.
let's stand for the purposes.
Okay.
I like to be less formal, but I suppose I will climb up on this authoritarian lectern. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Cool. People actually showed up. Yeah.
Do you want me to
Yeah. I
open
guess.
things up? So I'm Adam M. Lowenstein. I'm a freelance journalist based in DC. Very excited to be in your city in this new chapter of your city's history right now. Hope we get some of your energy in DC as well. Very happy to be here with David Z. Morris, the author of Stealing the Future. So thanks to Codex for hosting us, Robin. So why
Yes,
don't we,
very much.
this is like the coolest space, so like what better place to do a book event than a used bookstore. Why don't we, you want to start with the short excerpt, then
Yes.
I have some questions, we'll talk for maybe 40-ish minutes or so, and then if you guys, comments, questions, want to jump in, otherwise I'll keep going, and then should we wrap up at 8 o'clock or so, does that work?
Sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, this would be a very interactive. If people are interested in that, this is not like a formal presentation, despite your position on this.
Cool. I will try and keep this short, or the excerpt, so we have plenty of time for questions and discussion. I just, again, to reiterate, like, this is incredible because I feel like I might recognize you.
I get that a lot because I'm bald.
Okay, well then maybe I'm. Well, I have at least 3 good friends with like a dark beard. But I don't. Other than that, I don't think I know any of you, which is amazing because my book release event was obviously it was amazing because my family was there, but it was pretty much just my family and a few friends, and so to have just like people who don't even have an obligation to be here is fantastic. So I'm just going to read like 4 pages from chapter 6, Stealing the Future. To give like the short pitch, I've been a technology and finance reporter for many years. I was a columnist for CoinDesk during the sort of huge bubble of 2021 and 2022 in cryptocurrencies and kind of everything else. I covered the criminal trial of Sam Bankman-Fried after that bubble collapsed and his specific scheme collapsed. I was there, we were talking about it at the Southern District of New York, which is a few blocks from here, got that part of the story, and then the book as a whole tells the story of the fraud. And I've done, like I said, a lot of finance reporting over the years, so I think that one of the things it really brings is detailed analysis of the financial aspect of it, but it is also at least 50% a philosophy book about projection, simulation, new numbers, and their role in the economy and society. So
We'll get into that.
Yeah. So this is from chapter 6. The title of the chapter is The Logic of the Code. And it opens with an epigraph, like most self-indulgent writers, there's an epigraph in front of like every one of these chapters. Quote, "We believe that we invent symbols. The truth is that they invent us. We are their creatures, shaped by their hard defining edges. It is a profound mistake to believe that we must know of such things to be influenced by them, and in fact, to believe so is to believe in the most debased and superstitious kind of magic. The would-be sorcerer alone has faith in the efficacy of pure knowledge. Rational people know that things act of themselves or not at all." From Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun. I'll admit here live that I don't actually entirely understand what that means, but it sounds super cool. So we begin. Kenneth Arrow was a Nobel laureate economist and statistician who, among other work, pioneered theories about the impact of imperfect information on economic activity. Arrow's interest in epistemic humility, in trying to understand what we do not know, came in part out of his experience as a weather forecaster and planner for the U.S. Air Force during the Second World War. When he analyzed the predictions of staff meteorologists, Arrow recounted in a later autobiographical essay, He discovered that their long-range forecasts were no more accurate than random chance. When he suggested that the Air Force simply stop producing these fictional long-term forecasts, he was told, "The commanding general is well aware that the forecasts are no good. However, he needs them for planning purposes." This anecdote is emblematic of the patterns and failures of thought that have flourished among technologists and financiers through the decades since. Effective altruism and rationalism are just new wrappers on an enduring technocratic legacy continued in the figure of Sam Bankman-Fried, who exemplifies the core contradiction of this mindset. Professions of belief in logic, reason, and philanthropy that serve with remarkable consistency as flimsy disguises for real-world greed, ignorance, and self-dealing. This involution and self-negation has become a central overpowering disjunction in our economy and society. Presented as optimized, efficient, and benevolent, the forces of reductive calculation produce outcomes more enduringly harmful, chaotic, and terrifying than Bankman-Fried's comparatively petty crimes. This embrace of mathematical idolatry, this preference for the false confidence of useless forecasts over the necessity of engaged action and thoughtful observation in the living world, was diagnosed by economic theorist Jean Baudrillard nearly half a century ago as the logic of the code. Code, largely in the sense of computer code, a set of instructions on a substrate of binary logic switches that can do nothing other than execute commands. The rise of measurement and computation coincides with the emergence and spread of liquid markets that push the frontiers of fungibility and exchange ever further. The logic of the code is impelled not by the drive to better understand reality or foster human thriving, but by the internal demand of a financial system for equivalencies that facilitate trade and for predictions that put a current price on future outcomes. From this basis, the logic of the code has spread to behavioral algorithms that guide media consumption and set advertising prices, and to computer programs that convincingly mimic human communication while foreclosing human thought. Like Arrow, Baudrillard saw this logic's fatal flaw in its very desire for reliable measurement, complete data, totalizing models, and linear calculation. Quote, "Every closed or metastable functional or cybernetic system is shadowed by mockery and instantaneous subversion. This is the fatality of every system committed by its own logic to total perfection and therefore to a total defectiveness, to absolute infallibility and therefore irrevocable breakdown. The aim of all bound energies is their own death." Baudrillard and Arrow would have recognized Sam Bankman-Fried, an exemplar of the way rationality becomes mere post facto rationalization of beliefs and behaviors that everyday human reason can instantly clock as absurd and dangerous. The subject who embraces rationality against reason is rendered seemingly stupid by the world as it is, undone by submission to the purity of logic, and most of all to numbers, those mere approximations of reality. Arrow developed his thinking about probability and prediction in connection with military work and spent the bulk of his career at Stanford University. The logic of the code is substantially rooted in military history and grew in its present American form from Stanford-based statisticians' work in war planning. Bankman-Fried dismissed both the concept and practice of risk management, a compulsive gambler who lived as if data and calculation eliminated the unknown. This view was fostered most of all by effective altruism, which promises predictable, maximized results through management, measurement, and experimentation. Mimicking the sciences, EA and its rationalist corollary call on practitioners to eliminate the, quote, bias of emotion or human connection in their evaluation of what is most effective. If you meet your uncle with cancer in the road, kill him. Both the tools an effective altruist deploys to change the world and the measure of an act's effectiveness are fungible units, mathematically transformable into one another, a necessity of the logic of the code. Money, a macerated slurry of human effort and hope, goes in one end of the machine. Out the other come quality-adjusted life years, or quayle. These interchangeable units of human experience are essentially the same as utils, the notional unit of life by which utilitarians aim to measure the outcomes of their actions, in accord with the dictum of universalism attributed to Jeremy Bentham: every man to count for one, nobody for more than one. The bias towards measurement and interchange are undone, though, by their own tendency to progressively alienate symbols of measurement and exchange, whether cryptocurrencies, technology firm stocks, or quailies, from any underlying reality they assert to index. The increasing complexity of society has refined and elaborated our symbolic relationships, but also made them increasingly self-referential, unmoored, and adrift. Numbers and models are inescapably incomplete, their accuracy a horizon that can never be reached. Never more true than in the idea that units of human life are as fungible as currency. Measurement and exchange as the root of all decision-making is a universally imposed stupidity. These needs of the system supersede any drive for truth or accuracy, like Kenneth Arrow's commanders demanding forecasts, even forecasts they knew were wrong. I don't know if I'm going to be able to deal with this, but
why do you choose that excerpt?
Partly because I think it does connect to what we're. When I started writing this book 2 years ago or whatever, it really seemed certain that it would be completely obsolete because it was about a trial that happened already 2 years ago. But we're now living in like the real version of what Sam Bankman-Fried kind of pilot tested, so I wanted to make that connection in particular between this kind of like interchangeability. You probably caught a couple references to AI, and sort of the ethics of it, and we also are in a sort of more theory-friendly setting, so I kind of wanted to pick a theory so I can get to.
I don't want to go too much to the present and to the future yet, but you mentioned we're kind of living in it right now, what he tested. Say a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, I think that unfortunately, there are way too many ways in which that is the case. For those who don't know, like in a very specific way, OpenAI, which is now kind of the top topic of discussion in sort of technology and kind of the main topic of like cultural discussion right now, even I would say, is a very heavily like it comes directly out of the effective altruism movement that was the same one that influenced Sam Bankman-Fried, and even more sort of there's a overlap to the point of synonymity between effective altruism and rationalism, which I also refer to, and those are it's this kind of deep irony that they kind of ushered in this era of hyper destructive AI when their sort of founding mission was to prevent that. So so all of that is kind of referenced here and kind of it's a much less story driven section of the book, but kind of the key idea perhaps of it.
So effective altruism, rationalism, utilitarianism, you put these all under an umbrella of techno-utopianism. Would love to have you talk about what techno-utopianism means, what it includes, and then maybe talk a little bit about why the ideologies within it, why they matter, other than to the those of us who are clearly interested in it, but they matter beyond this space as well.
Yeah, so this is like where, again, there are like, and in some ways there's like a bias of description because these people love to start movements and put names on them, but there is this very long, and in fact, basically the origins of what I would say is a lineage of techno-utopianism goes back to, I'm going to forget his name because this is not a major subject of my expertise, but the Russian cosmist movement in the late 19th and early 20th century, which kind of believed that there would be some way to kind of, I mean, I think literally like suck back the dust of dead people from outer space and reconstitute them as living beings on Earth, and like it's a description of the resurrection or like of the end times, or the Christian end times or apocalypse or whatever version of it, which is still the logic here. Techno-utopianism is essentially like a religion that has all of the same narratives of any religion, but it wraps it in the promise that technology will actually achieve these things. So from Russian cosmism, you go to a long lineage, but the version that we have now is Elon Musk's belief that we can colonize Mars is very much a techno-utopian key idea. The idea that artificial general super intelligence is possible that will transcend human intelligence. That's a techno-utopian idea. It is linked to the idea that we can capture the information inside a human brain and even the personality of a human in a digital form that can be uploaded to a computer. And so the techno-utopian, the very specific techno-utopian vision that unites Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and in some sense Sam Bankman-Fried, is that we're going to colonize the stars not as human beings but as simulated human beings on servers, on server farms on other planets for some reason. And the really pernicious part of it is that both kind of effective altruism and this other related kind of pattern of thought called long-termism posits that future human lives should be treated in the present as ethically equivalent to the lives of currently living humans. That is to say, exchangeable in terms of utilitarian quali. And this is where you get this authoritarian turn, because what sneaks in there is utilitarianism already has a fundamental flaw that, at least for me, is irreconcilable, which is you purport to know the ideal future present state of all of reality, and you purport to know how your own actions are going to foster or lead to that far future state. And implicit in that, in sort of practiced utilitarianism, is the idea that I, the utilitarian, know. And that's very clear when you look at movements like rationalism, which are extremely insular, which essentially have worked themselves around to the perspective that the best thing they can spend money on is training themselves further, because they are the self-selected group with the best chance to solve the existential problems that they have predicted. And so it very much reduces down through this mechanism of faith that you're going to colonize the stars with all of these millions of people, unless something inconvenient like government regulation or democracy or egalitarian economics interferes with the present, which by their logic, all of these things impacting present politics would be ethically equivalent to killing billions of people in the future. And so this is trillions, yes. And so this is and a lot of the sort of, especially the authoritarian and sort of elitist elements of it are implicit, but once you unpack the claims that they're making, this is the sort of authoritarian implication. And of course, I talked about Sam Altman, but this is also, these are beliefs shared by Peter Thiel, and to some extent they, can be seen manifest in the real authoritarianism happening right now. Including, by the way, specifically rules prohibiting states from passing their own laws controlling artificial intelligence. So,
right. I feel like for a lot of people, there was a popular narrative for a while that tech was backing, tech was a progressive, industry essentially, and people were surprised.
Right. Elon Musk in particular.
Yeah, Tesla's making EVs. As the Obama era came to an end, and you started to see the David Sacks and the Peter Thiels, and others become a little bit more prominent, aligning themselves more with the right, and then eventually the authoritarian right. There was some head scratching of what happened to tech, when in fact it was very clear looking at it. I mean, for some people at the time, but definitely looking at it in hindsight, when you think about these philosophies and ideologies, that this has been an authoritarian worldview from the beginning for a while. Say the capital D Democratic Party or progressive movements were useful for them. They no longer are useful because they come with strings attached, and now they find an ally in a much more ideologically sympathetic.
I mean, I would also say it's a sort of, there's a political economy to it, right? Which is In the 2000s and 2010s, tech was very much this like growth narrative where because of the way venture capital works, there's sort of a, and obviously this maybe not continuously, but especially since 2008 in the zero interest rate period, you have this kind of huge bloat of funding for technology startups. And I guess to be really cynical about it, it's like very easy to be woke when you have like billions and billions of dollars in funding. And I don't mean that to like denigrate the substance of those beliefs. I'm saying that like we're in this era now where the interest rates are high, capital is expensive, cozying up to the government becomes a much more appealing strategy, just in a sort of basic survival sense.
Yeah.
And so, but you're also absolutely correct, and it goes back, I think, further than many people would think. Like Thiel, for like 2005 to 2016 or something, was like a libertarian, right? In sort of the public perception and how he presented himself, and I think that's sort of always been the hidden thread of digital culture and technology development. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to many parts of it, but even if you go back to like John Perry Barlow's Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace, which is now like, that's like the foundation of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and a lot of digital rights groups. I mean, those were like the techno hippies who very definitely turned right. I don't know about Barlow, individually, but like as a movement in California, it's been that way, yeah, from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think of both Sam Altman and J.D. Vance being kind of projects of Peter Thiel.
Mm-hmm.
Those projects
Yeah.
have proven successful.
Yes,
for him.
and this is actually something that I didn't learn until much more recently, or it would have been in the book. But like, yeah, I hadn't clocked exactly how closely Thiel and coached Altman, like really like taught him the ropes of inflating startup valuations, which is another major topic of the book.
Can you talk a bit about the parallels between the venture capital, and
Right.
EA? Because in a lot of ways
Right.
they're kind of the.
I mean, EA is the logic of venture capital transported into philanthropy, kind of whole cloth. Because
yeah, can you explain that a little?
yeah. So venture capital valuations work like this. You put, and I'm going to intentionally borrow a metaphor that Sam Bankman-Fried applied to cryptocurrency. You put $10 in a black box, and you write $100 on the black box, and now you have $100. And that's just how it works, which is basically you're building on models of like, here's our future revenue, here's the like total addressable market, here are the customers that we're going to go to, and those numbers add up to some like future valuation that make sense to hand X amount of money to a founder. And those are, I mean, it's a subject for its own sociological study, because those projections, those are very like, they're more like expressions of interpersonal relationships than they are actual calculations of like financial realities. And so that kind of like, by manifesting through what are again largely political processes, really, as you can tell from again the like this close friendship between Thiel and Altman, like that's pretty crucial to OpenAI becoming this wildly valued thing. It's like much more important than how much services OpenAI sells, and so you put this valuation on a thing, and then you put a much smaller amount of capital in, and you chop it up, and then you basically created a bunch of money from nothing that you can then go and sometimes use to get loans of real money. This is sort of notoriously what happened with Adam Neumann, the founder of WeWork, which people I think probably remember, but became this like grossly overvalued thing, and he walked away with $3 billion. And so the parallels, and I've forgotten the second half of the question, the parallels between venture
Just
capital
EA
and
VC.
EA, right? Yeah. So like, this is the venture capital model. EA is using those kinds of projections, but for like social change and like saving lives, basically, and that becomes again a question of like the way the word for it is just leverage. That if you put in a small amount of money early on, the theory is that like you can have this outsized impact way down the road. The difference, of course, is that like there is no endpoint or like exit, so to speak, for this idea of investment as a leveraged play on improving society. So there's no like falsifiability, there's no measurement, and most importantly, their timeline is basically infinite. And so they're just like, we're going to project these impacts out. So like my dollar now is going to have like $100 million worth of impact in 50 years or whatever, because I like did some math in between. The thing that is most important, I think, about this, for the story that's told in the book here, and about these people who are actually in these groups, is that this concept of like leverage and compounding returns over time into a far future impacts their like daily behavior and how they think about the management of their own time. And so people are having, like, people in EA and rationalism are, or at least were, this is mostly about a period from like 2015 until 2022, because with SBF a lot of this stuff blew up. But they were like having panic attacks and nervous breakdowns about like whether they were being as effective as possible on like a moment to moment basis, and kind of like hyper analyzing their decisions. And then you stack on top of it this like weird rationalist decision theory, and so you have like, it's nothing that has been systematically measured, but you have like above average rates of like mental health crisis within these movements, because of this, like, everything in the future depends on what I'm doing right now, but we also don't have any way to actually like measure that.
Right. And I think it bears repeating that these are just kind of weird and kind of sad ways of seeing the world, but they're also worldviews and ideologies that are directing billions of dollars and have massive political power too. So it's not like there's lots of fringe worldviews out there, as there should be. Like that's what the internet is for. But not all of them are.
And I mean, it's because I would argue, I mean, that's not like a coincidence, right? Like, speaking of Peter Thiel, Peter Thiel gave Eliezer Yudkowsky maybe his first $1 million, and again was like a sort of steward of this guy through the Silicon Valley ecosystem, and so if you have any kind of command of critical theory whatsoever, it's impossible not to conclude that like shapes the way these ideas develop over the 2 decades since. And I'm certainly not the only person to make this critique, but it's like the idea that you're going to get maximally rich and then do good things for the world with that is like a very convenient set of ideas if you happen to be in a position to get maximally rich and don't want to feel bad about that,
Right. And that's something you point out in the book, is that it's not, for whatever reason, tackling climate change, say, is not something that effective altruists are often
we can certainly talk about that one, which
toward.
is very funny.
They're directing it instead toward paying salaries to philanthropies that are doing effective altruism. So it's not tackling problems that would threaten their core business model.
Exactly. And I mean, the climate change thing is wild, but they
AGI will solve it.
I mean, AGI will solve it, which is just like, but more specifically, like they literally say that climate change is not an existential risk. Like, it might destroy most of human society, but it's not going to kill everybody. So we don't need to worry about it too much. I mean, there are other things to it. They do have somewhat reasonable arguments that like climate change is already the subject of a lot of work that also doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But like, I think what really kills their approach on that one in particular is that, of course, like, climate change is a political problem, and they're about like technology, basically, and so politics is not, as Sam found out, their specialty.
Yeah, let's talk about him a little bit, because he's obviously like the central thread through this book. You covered a lot of that trial, or covered the whole trial.
I think I missed one day. Yeah.
Can you just give maybe just an overview, like, of a psychological profile of Sam Bankman-Fried?
Yeah.
Because he went to prison, and that might make him exceptional in some ways, because most people who are committing fraud on maybe not this kind of scale, but this type of fraud are just living their lives. But he's not that different in the way he sees the world from a lot of people who have a lot of influence on how the world works right now. So
yeah, I mean, and actually, like, specifically to the point that a lot of people are living their lives, like, it has definitely been a source of anxiety for me for, like, the past year and a half that, like, Donald Trump is going to pardon Sam Bankman-Fried. Like, it's a real live question.
He won't because he was a big Democratic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is my take, but it nevertheless,
If he'd
Madman
been,
Theory has me
If
on
he'd been
toes.
funding the right wing, he'd be out already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point about his sort of political. Wait, I'm sorry. I again lost
Just
the
like
core of the question.
just how Sam Bankman-Fried seems to see the world, and
Right.
and then we'll come back to the campaign finance.
Or
stuff
and
in a second.
you use the word psychological profile, which I can't avoid jumping on. So there are two different versions of it. One is like the media version that existed from roughly like 2020 to 2022 when everything fell apart, and this was like the nth iteration of like a techno Silicon Valley genius kid, and he's like 29 or 30 at this time, has like huge hair, very disheveled, kind of. By the time 2022 rolls around, he's clearly like way out of shape. His body is suffering. His mythology includes like not sleeping that much, and so it's very much like in the sort of nth iteration of Mark Zuckerberg with a hoodie in the boardroom. But this is also very much tied to like his genius, his like unique perspective on risk and whatever. Kind of one of the most emblematic moments of how he was presented psychologically to the world was this sort of hagiographic profile that a venture capital fund called Sequoia wrote about him, where they recount a meeting with him when they were raising funds for FTX, and he was very clearly playing a video game during the meeting with the venture capitalists. And obviously by any normal human standard, this is like, this is kind of an important meeting. These guys are a big deal. You probably kind of want their money. And so like the instinct would think that this would be like an insult, but no.
Also basic human decency.
Basic human decency. But no, the venture capitalists are like, no, he's a genius. He's doing two things at once, right? And so that's like becomes the selling point, both publicly and apparently really to them. And they had to quickly remove that profile after the crime was revealed. And I think that that's the psychological profile of like this kind of disheveled genius kid. The real person, it became very clear, and the reason I really became fascinated with this story is because he was so completely dogged and remains to this day absolutely unmoving from the position that, yes, I took the depositors' money, maybe they signed something saying that I wasn't supposed to take it, but I am a genius investor, so I did that, and we totally would have made all the money back, except somebody bullied me into declaring bankruptcy, but everything would have been fine. And he just has this like completely counterfactual, and there's like, this is clearly false. There's nothing true about the way that he presents it. Unfortunately, Michael Lewis basically regurgitated the story in his version of the book, which is sold a lot of copies, and apparently there will be an Apple TV version of that at some point, which I'm really curious what they're going to do with. But it's he just like this commitment to completely counterfactual versions of the world, and the delusion I think is very much tied up in this systematic probability thinking where like I predicted the thing that was going to happen, and if it didn't, that's because like the system failed me, not because I got anything wrong. Did you?
Oh no, I was just going to say that I also feel like he was part of this whole like crypto-utopian thing. Like somehow people, like going back to like 2000 when Ethereum and Bitcoin, after that became really popular, 2010, there was this idea that this was not just another financial gambit, but there was like this utopian promise. Now we can see in hindsight that it was basically like subprime mortgages or something. That was basically like a hoodwink.
The crypto part of it, for sure. I mean, it's actually a little bit counterintuitive because, like, he is profiting off of that narrative and selling it. But, I was working for a crypto publication at the time, perhaps the only respectable one that ever has or ever will exist, and which CoinDesk, which unfortunately, in effect, no longer exists. Because we got bought out because our parent company was destroyed by the collapse of FTX, which is awesome. But point being, he actually, in a move that I think was very calculated and very smart, he told people like Matt Levine at Bloomberg that he didn't really believe in all this crypto bullshit. So like he was simultaneously selling the hype, but saying like, I'm just here because there's an opportunity to trade. I'm good at trading, and I want to make a lot of money for effective altruism. So he took the utopian promise and kind of like shifted it away from crypto itself and was just like, no, this is a way that I'm just going to make money. So in fact, I'm going to say out front that I'm a little bit cynical about this crypto thing. And so in fact, that kind of weirdly diffused a lot of people's skepticism. Whereas if you are like a crypto utopian, like maybe you're going to get pretty far with the crypto guys, but like you're not going to get on the cover of like, you know, Fortune or something. And you're not going to get to go to the White House or speak in front of Congress. And so in a weird sort of way, his cynicism about crypto maybe like smoothed the path for him. But so he's, to finish this very long and winding answer, the real Sam Bankman-Fried is a compulsive narcissistic sociopath who according to the judge, lied during his own testimony at trial more times than were worth counting. And so that's not me, that's the judge. And so there are so many hilarious aspects to this. One is that, you know, you can see the delusion as well in his mother, Barbara Fried, who, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but before the trial began, said something to the effect of, Sam would never tell an untruth, it's just not in him. And so the sort of parental aspect is also a major theme here, but we can get into that.
Let's get into that a little bit, because it kind of ties into...
I think we have about 5 more minutes, unfortunately.
What's the rush? I thought we were just getting started.
I mean, there's a reason it's 300 pages.
So, let's talk about SBF's parents. If anybody has any other questions, be thinking about those, and then just shout them out after this. And the reason I want to ask you about this is because not only were his parents Stanford ethicists, essentially he was raised in this...
a tax fraud lawyer and a utilitarian ethicist, which...
who, and his, you know, to the campaign finance point from a few minutes ago, his mom in particular was funneling a lot of FTX money or customer deposits into a Democratic, you know, to Democratic fundraising. There's something you note in a couple places in the book, which is that a whole second case just got tossed out. That would have potentially brought a lot more of this stuff to light.
Specifically international bribery and the campaign finance.
And the kind of stuff that might have implicated his parents a little bit more than they already were, which is like, and it's been, you know, pretty tragic downfall for them as well. So maybe talk a little bit about his parents in the context of just the scale of elite complicity and elite enablers all around him his entire life. Not to take away any responsibility from him, but just...
this is actually one of the trickiest things in the book, which is that I do kind of regard SBF to a certain extent as a victim, and partly as a victim of his parents. And there are some really specific parts of this that, you know, make it clear that we do not have the full story here. One of the most incredible is that from very early on in Alameda and FTX, his father, Joe Bankman, was involved in supervising the legal strategy for the entire kind of group. And Joe Bankman, a Stanford professor, elite lawyer, hired for his son's startup a guy named Dan Friedberg. And Dan Friedberg, at the time, was already known to have been involved in something called the Ultimate Bet scandal, which is when a poker website used cheating software to rob its customers of millions of dollars. Dan Friedberg is on a tape that was released in, I think, 2013, that's about 3 hours long, of him discussing cover-up strategies with the founders of Ultimate Bet. And so this is like public, and Friedberg is not implicated in the fraud itself, but he's known to have participated in the cover-up, and Joe Bankman hires him to run legal for FTX. Later, Dan Friedberg would help him commit bank fraud by creating entire fake electronics companies that would be used to open up bank accounts in the United States to gain access to U.S. banking. But that's Joe, right, from the very beginning. And then at the end, Joe is also in very exclusive group chats with just basically, my memory is a little bit hazy here, but these chats were shown at trial. It was basically the 4 convicted co-conspirators and Joe talking about the fact that the money wasn't there. And then in 2023, Anthony Scaramucci speaking at Consensus, the CoinDesk conference, said that Joe had told him that there was an asset liability mismatch several days before that information was public. And of course, this is important because people are making withdrawals at this time. So like insiders could have been taking money off the platform because they knew it was illiquid before that knowledge became public and withdrawals shut down. And you know, there have been discussions or interviews with people who know them. Puck was an amazing source on a lot of this kind of like insider drama, but people said that there's like, it's confusing how this happened. I mean, people were sincere in their belief that like Joe and Barbara were good people. They had, you know, and this is, I think, maybe for people in this room, a nice way to sink your hooks in here. They were NPR liberals. And for all of Joe's involvement, you then have Barbara, once she's involved, basically using an FTX credit card to buy furniture for a house that has been put in their name in the Bahamas, a $10 million home, put in their name but paid for with FTX money. And she's ordering FTX staffers to order rugs and things for the home. And then there's also like a $10 million cash gift that Joe writes an email to Sam. Well,
this might be the saddest part of the book in some ways.
So there's actually two emails from Joe to Sam that are amazing, and I actually am going to rewind because the saddest one that I think you might be referring to starts out, Joe comes on as a coordinator for, I think, not just the legal work but nonprofit work, something to do with FTX. He sends an email to his son and he says, "Sam, this is the first I've heard of my $200,000 salary for this job. It was supposed to be $1 million. That means I need to be getting a lot more money, and I'm going to loop your mother in on this email." And so like he's bullying his son for what is clearly, by the way, an extractive salary. Like there is, even in the sort of insane world of cryptocurrency, you're not giving your like head of philanthropy $1 million a year salary. So he asked for this gift. According
that
to
is the email I was referring to.
Right. So there is a second email though, which is that according to one of my sources who spent time with Sam, he felt sort of pressured by his dad's email to like give some exorbitant gift to his parents, but instead of giving out this like big salary bump to his dad, he just gives a lump sum of $10 million, which is structured as a loan to him personally, which, by the way, we also have emails from his dad implying that this loan is not expected to be repaid. He gives a $10 million gift to his parents, and then his dad sends an email saying, "Thank you, son, for this amazing gift. It means your mom can retire, which she would not have otherwise been able to do." And so it is this like incredible, and then of course there's also